Mom's gonna live with us too," my husband declared to me, who had just bought the top floor of a 50-story luxury high-rise condo, smirking as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "If you don't like it, you should leave." My mother-in-law joined my husband in mocking me with a scornful laugh. "They have always been like this. Always treating me terribly. And they act as if it's all perfectly normal, not showing any sign of remorse." I looked down, blocking their gaze, ensuring they couldn't see my twisted, ugly smile of defiance. My husband, who has always neglected me and our children, never looking after the family. And my mother-in-law, who always egged him on. I'm not going to be controlled by them any longer. Resolved, I lifted my face, forcing a vague smile, and stared back at them. "That's not possible." I muttered this in my mind and looked down again. They hurled insults at me, seeing that I didn't talk back. Let them underestimate me all they want. I have been warming up a plan in secret, ready to expose the truth to my delusional husband. And on the day of the move, a flood of calls from my mother-in-law. "Oh, you found out, huh?" By now, my husband and mother-in-law must be panicking. Soon, they will scream when they face the harsh truth. My name is Judy Baker, a 47-year-old working housewife. Currently, I live with my son, Aaron, and daughter, Lisa. My husband Daniel has been away on business trips for years. And we haven't even been in contact for ages. Our relationship is so strained it's hard to call it a family. But it wasn't always bad between me and my husband. We met at a company drinking party when I was 23, and he was 3 years older than me. He was sociable and kindly let me join their group when I was nervously stiff in a corner at my first party. That got me admiring him. He noticed me, and soon we started dating. He was always cheerful and fun, and I found myself increasingly drawn to him. Though sometimes he was a bit careless, not really listening but just nodding along. His slightly clueless demeanor was overflowing with humanity. And at that time, it was very attractive to me. As I fell for him more and more, I seriously thought about marriage. He must have realized my feelings, because one day, he proposed to me earnestly. I was moved to tears and nodded, dreaming of a happy married life with him. However, there was a slight hitch when we went to announce our marriage. While his father was reasonable, his mother seemed unable to let go. "Judy, you are only 23, right? Can she really support Daniel properly at that age? I suppose she can't even manage household chores or her job properly, let alone raise children." Criticized outright, I shrank back, but then his father gently scolded her. "What are you talking about? You married me when you were the same age as Judy. Besides, you gave birth to Daniel when you were 25. At his words, my mother-in-law fell silent, albeit reluctantly. Seizing the moment, Daniel cheerfully said to them both, "It's okay, Mom. Judy might still be young, but she's earnest and hardworking. She'll make a good wife. Right, Judy? You'll get along with Mom, won't you?" I nodded sincerely to his words. "Well, if Daniel says so." With a sigh, my mother-in-law seemed somewhat resigned. Although I was a bit worried, my husband's words and his father's intervention relieved me. Thus, I decided to marry him. Looking back, I was really naive then. When I told my family about the marriage, my parents were very happy, but my older sister frowned. She was always a good listener, a consultant in any situation. And she must have sensed something off about my in-laws. "Are you sure it's okay? Wouldn't it be better to date a bit longer?" I shook my head at her cautious words. "It's fine. After all, Daniel trusts me." I was eager to marry the man I loved and took my sister's concern lightly. In hindsight, I regret not taking her words more seriously. Seeing my determination, my sister sighed and looked me straight in the eyes. Okay. If you say so, I'll support you all the way. Then she took my hands and continued. But if anything happens, you must consult me. I'm always on your side. Okay, thank you. And so, with blessings all around, I married my husband. However, the marriage didn't stop my mother-in-law's snide remarks or constant nagging. And despite being newlyweds, my husband dragged me to his parents' house every weekend. I'm an only son, and I want you to get along with mom soon. He took me there forcefully, oblivious to my discomfort. Initially, my mother-in-law openly criticized me even in front of her husband. But after being repeatedly scolded by him, her attitude softened somewhat. Relief was short-lived though, as she soon started making snide remarks in secret. My father-in-law and husband were never around when she blamed me. And I could consult no one as the years passed by. However, things slightly improved later. 2 years later, my son Aaron was born, and 2 years after that, my daughter Lisa. With the busier days, I pleaded with my husband to reduce our visits to his parents' house. Even so, my husband was hardly cooperative with household chores or parenting. Even if your parents' house is close, it's impossible to go there every week given our current situation. But mom insists on seeing Aaron, and you should show some filial piety once in a while. I nearly blurted out, why don't you do something for the family too? But I swallowed my words in frustration. Every day I'm running around taking care of the kids and the house, yet all he talks about is his mother. How she's lonely, how she worries about Aaron. I can't help but wonder, who does he think his family really is? It became clear after we got married that he was excessively considerate towards his mother. Probably because she dotes on him excessively. Adding to my headaches, there was another reason I didn't want to visit his parents' house. My mother-in-law adored my grandson Aaron, pampering him without reserve. But she blatantly ignored and mistreated my granddaughter Lisa. It wasn't that she was overtly mean like she was to me. She simply showed no interest in her at all. She would buy toys and sweets for Aaron but nothing for Lisa. She only talked to Aaron, constantly reminding him, Aaron, you are the heir of the Baker family. So you must listen well to what Grandma says. Each time she said this, young Aaron would tilt his head and look up at me, puzzled. Mother, please, I'd rather you not say things like that. As I stumbled over my words, my father-in-law quickly picked up Aaron and, looking into his son's eyes, said, Aaron, you don't have to listen to Grandma. More importantly, you should grow up to be a kind man. Aaron would giggle joyfully in response. And my father-in-law gently kept him away from his grandmother's influence. After Lisa was born, my father-in-law started speaking differently to Aaron. Do you love Lisa, Aaron? Yes, I love Lisa very much. Then you must promise to protect your sister. Can you promise Grandpa that? Yes, I can promise. Perhaps moved by some thought. He made a pinky promise with Aaron when he was 6 and Lisa was 4. The difference in treatment between Aaron and Lisa by my mother-in-law was glaringly obvious. Even to the young children. That's why, while my son and daughter grew fond of their gentle and kind grandfather, they never warmed up to their grandmother, who showed interest only in her grandson. Aaron often asked me sadly, Mom, why doesn't Grandma treat Lisa the same way she treats me? Seeing my son hug his sister tightly as he asked this, my heart tightened. Consequently, I further reduced my visits to my in-laws. I was disliked by my mother-in-law anyway and didn't want to be near her. Moreover, her egregious behavior towards my children made me refuse to visit my in-laws under the guise of being too busy with childcare and household duties. My sole focus was on protecting my children's hearts. Initially, my husband grumbled about us not accompanying him. but probably tired of dealing with my steadfast refusal. He eventually started visiting his parents alone on weekends. This naturally created a distance between us, and a year later, when my daughter turned 5, my father-in-law passed away, leading my husband to center his life even more around his mother. With the removal of the father-in-law, who had acted as a buffer, my husband stopped insisting that I visit the in-laws. Perhaps his mother had said something to him. He would go to his mother's house after work and prioritize her over his own family on holidays, even though he had always put our family last. This behavior only worsened. Our children were now in elementary school, and there were many school events involving parents. Yet, he always prioritized his mother's needs. Eventually, he began spending most of the week at his mother's house. While I struggled with the growing rift between us, I got caught up in daily childcare and housework, allowing the situation to become nebulous. A year after my father-in-law's death, my husband's home visits dwindled to a few times a month. Consequently, his interaction with our children all but disappeared. I desperately pleaded with him to fulfill his role as a father. "Hey, the kids have a sports day coming up. You can handle that on your own." He dismissively cut me off. "Besides, I've already promised to help Mom with something that day." Again, his mother's needs. In a sharp tone, I confronted him. "But these are once-in-a-lifetime events for our children. You're their father. No, it's only natural to prioritize my mother now. She's old. So, are our daughter and son's feelings irrelevant? How many times have the children asked when their father would return or come to see them? Each time, I had to console them. They would tear up and clench their jaws. How many times have I felt heartache at their brave faces? My husband would always angrily retort that we lacked compassion for his mother, before storming out to return to her, sometimes not coming back for weeks. This cycle continued for years until I began contemplating divorce. Yet, relying solely on my part-time job income was hardly enough to support 2 children. That's when I remembered my sister's words. She hadn't been supportive of our marriage. Realizing her concerns had become reality, I decided to call her for advice. After hearing my story, my sister chuckled slightly. Just as I thought. It turned out that at that time, my sister was married and had faced a similar situation. So, hearing my story really made her uneasy. "I should have talked to you more seriously and stopped you." Muttering somewhat self-deprecatingly, she shared a certain idea with me. Moreover, she offered financial and parenting support. In fact, my sister had divorced a few years ago, and was now able to give me a lot of useful advice from her own experience. She was living alone near our parents' home and working. Following her advice, I began to prepare for divorce little by little. At the same time, my husband, who rarely came home anymore, suddenly announced over the phone that he was being transferred. "I don't know when I'll be able to return, and Mom is coming with me," he briefly informed me and hung up. I was surprised, but this situation was actually a boon for me. With my husband away, I took action towards my goals with the help of my sister. The idea she suggested was challenging, but it made every day fulfilling. Seeing this, my children stopped mentioning their father. Instead, they started to support me. Their encouragement gave me strength. 3 years later, I had finally achieved my goal. By that time, the financial support from my husband had ceased. But I had successfully secured a full-time position in a certain industry, and was able to support the family on my own. Slowly, the preparations for divorce were coming together. During this time, my children grew up healthily. Their elementary and middle school entrances and graduations, high school and university exams flew by in the blink of an eye. Of course, I contacted my husband multiple times during this period. But he never returned from his work location to attend any of the children's school events. And then, 14 years after his transfer, when our son was already working and our daughter was an adult, my husband suddenly came home with his mother. It was truly a sudden return. And my children and I were taken aback, looking at each other in surprise. Despite our confusion, my husband acted as if he still ruled the house, adopting the same haughty demeanor as when he lived with us. Naturally, our irritation grew. My children and I, who had received no familial duties, responsibilities, or above all, love from him, reacted coldly and disdainfully. Hey, what's with that attitude towards the head of the family? Who do you think allowed you to live comfortably? With a sullen expression, my son bluntly replied. Who? It's all thanks to Mom, right? What? There's no way a part-time housewife could support a household. Don't spout nonsense. Seeing my husband rant, a question suddenly occurred to me. Why have you come back now? He answered arrogantly, without changing his posture. Mom recently hurt her leg and became bedridden. She needs care. At his words, my mother-in-law nodded. My husband then began to describe an outrageous plan to us. We'll all live here together, and you and Lisa will take care of Mom. It's only natural for the family. Hearing that, my children and I looked at each other. You've never acted like a father before, don't start playing family now. That's right, we have our own lives. Plus, we're moving out to a new place. Huh? What are you saying? You just need to listen to me. Faced with his selfish words, my children and I decided to mercilessly execute the plan we had already devised. Actually, you know the luxury high-rise condo near the shopping center? Huh? The 50-story one? Thinking he had taken the bait, I continued without confirming or denying. We've decided to move there. I tried contacting you, but you never responded. Huh? Then, we'll live there with Mom. As my husband spouted this absurdity, with my mother-in-law nodding vigorously beside him. Don't joke. Absolutely not. My children and I desperately resisted living together. But my husband and mother-in-law didn't listen at all. And were fully prepared to move into the luxury condo. Mom's gonna live with us too. My husband declared to me, who had just bought the top floor of a 50-story luxury high-rise condo, smirking as if it was the most natural thing in the world. If you don't like it, you should leave. My mother-in-law joined my husband in mocking me with a scornful laugh. They have always been like this. Always treating me terribly. And they act as if it's all perfectly normal, not showing any sign of remorse. I looked down, blocking their gaze, ensuring they couldn't see my twisted, ugly smile of defiance. My husband, who has always neglected me and our children, never looks after the family. And my mother-in-law, who always egged him on. I'm not going to be controlled by them any longer. Resolved, I lifted my face, forcing a vague smile, and stared back at them. That's not possible. I muttered this in my mind and looked down again. They hurled insults at me, seeing that I didn't talk back. Let them underestimate me all they want. I have been warming up a plan in secret, ready to expose the truth to my delusional husband. And so, upon discovering the harsh truth, my husband and mother-in-law were bound to scream in dismay. On the day that my husband and mother-in-law moved, it turned out that my children and I had also moved to a different single-family home. Yes, the move to the luxury condo was, in fact, a ruse all along. Surely by now, they are in a panic. As proof, my smartphone is flooded with calls from them. I answered the phone from my mother-in-law in a deliberately leisurely tone, saying, "Hello? what is this about?
Yeah.
Why aren't you guys there? Oh, you found out, huh? And then, I confronted the two with the harsh reality. My children and I have already safely moved out. At my words, my husband and mother-in-law screamed. What do you mean? Explain this. They complained to me, but I firmly rejected their assumption that we would live together. Furthermore, I used the long separation as grounds to present a divorce to my husband. In fact, since deciding on a divorce, I had consulted with a divorce lawyer recommended by my sister. I was well prepared. My husband grumbled. But when I told him that the divorce could proceed because of our long separation, he finally agreed to it. In the end, he spat out a warning, saying he didn't care how hard I struggled as a part-time housewife without savings after buying a home. I muttered in my mind that I was already working full-time and hung up the phone. Unknown to him, over the past 14 years, I had attended nursing school and become a nurse. When I consulted with my sister about the divorce, she had suggested I enroll in a nursing school using a nursing scholarship, which would be repaid by working at a specific hospital. In fact, she had also become a nurse using this scholarship. At that time, she told me that her hospital was hiring, and she encouraged me to apply. I gratefully accepted her advice, and it brought me to where I am today. Another thing my husband didn't know was that our son had landed a job at a prestigious company. Our move into a detached house was possible because I was able to work fully and my son's high income gave us plenty of financial room. And the luxury condo that I supposedly bought for my husband and mother-in-law to live in was not a new building but a 60-year-old condo that was rumored to collapse if there was an earthquake. Which was why I was able to buy that for a song. My husband must have been shocked by now. He had mistakenly thought he would be living in a brand new condo near the shopping center. But that was just a misunderstanding based on his own assumptions. 3 months after divorcing my husband, both he and my mother-in-law were brought into the hospital where I worked. Afterwards, upon learning of suspicions about the building's defects, they gave up on living in that condo and seemed to have moved into a rundown apartment instead. My mother-in-law, whose mobility was impaired and health declining, had not prepared adequately for living in a drafty, dilapidated apartment and consequently worsened her cold. My husband also caught the cold from her and developed a high fever. I was astounded by their lack of planning but continued with my work, pretending to be unaware. After a while, a woman came to visit them in the hospital. It appears that my ex-husband had started dating another woman after our divorce. This woman, who came to visit, seemed to have been convinced by my husband that I was a terrible wife. While I was taking his temperature, his new girlfriend hurled insults and called me a terrible woman. I heard from Daniel. You treated his mother poorly and lied all the time. I quietly continued my work and clarified to her in a clear tone. I don't know what my ex-husband told you, but he prioritized his mother over everything for 14 years, never once contributing financially during our separation. What? The woman was visibly shocked. Daniel protested, claiming it was impossible. I pulled out a bank statement I always carried from my file and handed it to Daniel. After checking its contents, Daniel voiced his shock. It's true, but how? Stunned, he seemed to have an epiphany and headed to his mother's room, asking loudly, Mom, I always left you in charge of the finances, didn't I? What's all this about? While shocked by her son's vehement tone, my mother-in-law's face turned red as she trembled. In fact, I had once heard about her reckless spending when my father-in-law was still alive. That's why he had always managed the finances at the family home. It's likely that my mother-in-law had embezzled the money meant for us. Misunderstanding that she could now freely use the money, she must have squandered it. As I explained this calmly to the woman, she looked horrified and initiated a breakup with my ex-husband. She then left the hospital room with loud footsteps. Seeing her leave, my ex-husband, enraged, verbally abused his mother in foul language. "Everything's ruined because of you. What are you going to do about this? I did nothing wrong. What's wrong with using my own son's money?" As they caused a commotion, I quietly stepped away. Later, during his stay in the hospital, Daniel persistently pleaded with me to reconsider our relationship. "There's no way I can reconsider with you. Plus, I'm about to be transferred." Indeed, I was moving to a sister hospital in another region. My children and I felt too many bad memories tied us to our current place. Feeling this way, we discussed the situation and decided to buy a house in the neighboring state. We did this to start a new life. 5 years later, my children received a call that their grandmother had passed away. They hesitated to attend the funeral, but I encouraged them to go for a final goodbye. I heard from the two of them later that when they saw my ex-husband after a long time, he had aged considerably. My daughter quietly mentioned that he looked older than his years. And the funeral was a shabby affair. Hey, we're still family, right? Help me out. Although my son and daughter were clung to by their father, they fulfilled their obligations and returned home. My ex-husband, known among relatives for the details of our divorce, became increasingly estranged. In the end, having lost his mother, he ended up alone. I think parents inevitably pass on before their children. Isn't it a parent's duty to guide their children so they can walk alone? I vow to myself not to forget this. To not tread the same path as my former mother-in-law and ex-husband. I intend to maintain a careful distance, ensuring not to overstep into my children's family lives. Since then, I have thrived as a nurse while building strong relationships with my married children.